The emergency alert flashed across Dr. Alistair Cade's screen, disrupting the calm monotony of his shift. He stared at it for a moment, blinking. A mission request? At this hour? The clock in the corner of his desk blinked the unholy hour of 3:27 a.m., and his coffee was barely warm. He wasn't sure if his exhaustion was clouding his judgment, or if he was genuinely curious about what kind of emergency would require his attention at this hour. But he knew the answer before the message finished loading. He read it aloud to himself in a soft, disbelieving voice. Urgent request for Dr. Alistair Cade, specialist in molecular regeneration and emergency field medicine. Viridia 7. The King's daughter has been severely injured. Immediate departure required. Flight coordinates attached. He frowned, rereading it. Viridia 7. The King's daughter. Okay. He'd been on the fringes of the galactic spotlight for years, known mostly among the interstellar elite as the guy who could patch up anything, whether it was a human lung on the verge of collapse or an alien wound that defied conventional biology. He had the kind of expertise that made him useful, but not the kind of fame that made him want to trade his quiet life for the chaos of the universe. Or so he thought. But Viridia 7? That was an entirely different level. The Viridians were known across the cosmos for their towering, luminous stature and their near-mythical technology. Their homeworld had been at the center of trade routes for centuries, and their politics were infamous for being as complicated as an overclocked quantum processor. If they were reaching out to a human like him, it meant things were really bad. But the King's daughter? That was no small thing. Alistair let out a sigh, running a hand through his hair. All right, here goes nothing, he muttered, tapping the flight coordinates. A soft chime sounded, and the ship began to materialize in his field of vision. A sleek interstellar craft built for speed, designed to zip between worlds with a precision that would make any Earth-based engineer break into a cold sweat. 10 minutes later, he was on board, staring out the porthole at the swirling starfield beyond. He settled into his seat, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. No time for jitters. He'd dealt with worse, he had to. But something about this felt different. This wasn't just a job. This wasn't just another patient to patch up and move on. This was a royal family, and one of their own was in critical condition, and on a personal level, Alistair didn't care who you were, where you were from, or what kind of blood you bled. No one deserved to suffer when there was a cure. As the ship's engines hummed to life, a thought crossed his mind, and he chuckled to himself. I really hope they've got a decent coffee maker on that planet. Last time I was on a foreign world, they gave me some kind of green liquid that tasted like algae and regret. The trip was long, interstellar flights always were, but there was no denying the stunning view outside the window as they cruised through the cosmos. The planet Viridia 7 came into view, a pale blue jewel surrounded by the deep darkness of space. Its rings sparkled like a halo, and its massive cities glowed faintly from below. It was a sight that made even a jaded space traveler like Alistair feel small. The ship touched down with barely a jolt, its landing gears locking into place with a soft metallic hiss. A team of Viridian attendants, their pale green skin shimmering in the light, greeted him at the docking bay. They said nothing, just motioned for him to follow them, their movements fluid and precise. Alistair's boots echoed against the marble floors of the palace as he was escorted through lavish halls adorned with shimmering holograms and bioluminescent plants. Everything in this place seemed to hum with life, yet the air was thick with tension. As they passed, a few royal guards stood at attention, their multi-limbed forms rigid, their expressions unreadable. Alistair was used to high-pressure situations, but this felt like walking into the lair of a beast. They reached a set of double doors, and one of the attendants gestured for him to enter. Inside, the room was a blend of ancient opulence and alien technology. Holographic interfaces hovered in mid-air, while ancient stone carvings covered the walls, their meaning known only to the most knowledgeable historians. At the center of it all, lying unconscious on a transparent medical bed, was the King's daughter. She looked human, almost, at least at first glance. But there was an undeniable otherworldly beauty to her. She had violet skin, iridescent like a pearl in the light, and hair that seemed to shimmer in shades of blue. Her features were sharp, elegant and delicate, like someone had sculpted her with a loving hand. Yet there was no mistaking the severity of her condition. Her chest barely rose with each shallow breath, and various diagnostic screens around her flickered erratically, showing signs of internal instability. Alistair stepped forward, a flash of uncertainty passing through him. He'd worked with some complex alien biology in his time, but this was something else. These were no simple fractures or infections. This injury was systemic, a disruption in the very fabric of her being. "Tell me what happened," he asked, his voice steady, even as he ran his fingers over the glowing interface beside her bed. He had no idea what half of these readings meant yet, but he would figure it out. The Viridian doctor at his side, an alien with 6 eyes and a head that rotated like an owl's, shifted uncomfortably. She was attacked. A political faction. We believe they used advanced nanotechnology to destabilize her cellular structure. We've tried everything. Alistair frowned, looking up from the data. Advanced nanotech? Well, that's fun. Should make this an interesting puzzle. The Viridian doctor didn't laugh, but Alistair couldn't help himself. There was something absurdly amusing about finding humor in the middle of an alien medical crisis. "Look, no pressure, right?" Alistair muttered under his breath. "Just a simple day at the office." Alistair didn't waste any time. He moved around the medical chamber, his mind already running through the options. The room, bathed in soft ambient light, hummed with the low frequency of Viridian medical tech, sensors beeping rhythmically, diagnostic screens flashing information that was as incomprehensible as it was urgent. It was a luxury, he knew, to have access to technology so advanced that the most complex issues could often be solved with the wave of a hand. But it didn't matter how advanced the tech was if you didn't understand the underlying problem. And this was an alien problem. He slid his fingers along the edge of the transparent bed where the princess lay, her skin shifting subtly in the light. There were so many layers to her condition that it was like peeling back the skin of an onion. But in this case, each layer threatened to trigger a catastrophic failure of her system. Nanobots had infiltrated her body, but not in the traditional sense. These weren't your typical invasive nanos. These ones had been designed to mimic the regenerative processes of the Viridian body, but something had gone horribly wrong. "Your typical nanotech failure," Alistair muttered to himself as he examined the readings. "Brought to you by politics, bad decisions, and a whole lot of misunderstanding." The Viridian doctor beside him didn't catch the humor, but then again, Alistair wasn't sure anyone here had much of a sense of humor. They were all so damn serious. He cleared his throat, trying to refocus. "I need a full data dump of her bioelectric field," he ordered, his voice sharper now. "And a full scan of the nanobot protocol. I don't care how ancient it is, I'll take it." The doctor hesitated, his 6 eyes blinking in tandem, and then he nodded, moving to a console in the corner of the room. Alistair could hear the faint whirring of machinery as the Viridian doctor pulled up a series of holographic data streams, which floated in mid-air like fragile ribbons of light. "I'm not sure you'll find much, human. This tech is advanced, even by our standards. The princess's injury was caused by an internal assault, a poison of sorts. These nanobots, they were meant to heal her wounds, but they instead turned against her." "Well, that's great," Alistair replied dryly, hands still hovering over the transparent medical bed. "You'd think they'd read the fine print before signing up for this job, right?" The Viridian doctor didn't get it. Alistair exhaled and focused on the diagnostics now floating in front of him. There was no denying the depth of the issue. These weren't just simple rogue bots causing damage. They were reshaping the princess's internal structure. The nanobots had bonded with her cells, hijacking her very DNA. If he didn't stabilize her soon, she would suffer a complete systemic collapse. But the solution wasn't straightforward. There was no pill or quick fix, and no medical procedure he could use to flush them out. "Well, this is fun," Alistair muttered under his breath, taking a step back and shaking his head. A regular Tuesday at the office. "Doctor?" The Viridian physician's voice had an edge of desperation. "Can you save her?" "Save her?" Alistair glanced over, an eyebrow raised. "Well, that's the plan. But before we go all hero of the day, I'd like to get a little more information." He paused, inspecting the multi-layered holograms around him, looking for patterns in the chaos. "Let me guess, your fancy tech can't get rid of these bots either." "Correct," the Viridian doctor admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "They've bonded with her biology in a way we cannot undo. We've tried to disrupt the nanobot pattern, but nothing works." Alistair rubbed his chin thoughtfully. This was tricky. The nanobots were evolving, almost like they were developing intelligence, adapting faster than any conventional cure could follow. He took a deep breath and mentally ran through his options. If these bots were evolving, there might be a way to turn their own evolution against them. All right, he said, a flicker of a plan starting to form in his mind. "We need to get creative. First things first, I need a zero-point energy field generator." The Viridian doctor's eyes widened. "That is highly experimental technology, Doctor. It's illegal to use on living beings without extensive approval." Alistair shot him a grin. "What's the point of being a hero if you can't bend a few rules, huh?" he said, flashing a quick wink. The joke was lost on the Viridian doctor, but Alistair didn't care. The key to saving the princess was going to lie in something unconventional, and the zero-point generator would give him the edge he needed to disrupt the nanobot's self-regulation. The doctor hesitated for a long moment, then gave a resigned nod. "I'll retrieve the generator," he muttered, clearly uncertain. While the Viridian physician went off to fetch the equipment, Alistair turned back to the princess, his thoughts racing. The nanobots might have gone rogue, but they were still a part of her biological system. They were supposed to heal, not destroy. Alistair knew it wasn't just about eliminating the nanobots. It was about giving her cells a chance to fight back, to regain control over what had been hijacked. He stepped up to the bed again, gently adjusting the complex array of sensors connected to her. His fingers brushed against her skin, and something unexpected happened. A pulse of energy, soft but unmistakable, rippled through the air. Alistair froze. What in the world was that? Before he could react, the energy spike vanished, leaving nothing behind but the gentle hum of the room. His eyes flicked to the diagnostic panel. A strange reading was flashing now, an unknown electromagnetic disturbance in her bioelectric field. It was subtle, like an imperceptible ripple in calm waters, but it was there. He leaned in, frowning. Something wasn't right, but it wasn't entirely bad either. "Could it be?" Alistair muttered, trailing off. At that moment, the Viridian doctor returned, carrying a small humming device. He handed it to Alistair with an air of reluctance. "This is highly experimental, Doctor. Proceed with caution." Alistair gave the device an approving glance. It was a sleek piece of technology, small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. He could feel the hum of power in it, and his instincts told him it was the key to turning the tide. "Well," he said, glancing back at the princess with a smirk, "let's see if I can still make miracles happen, huh?" The device buzzed as he activated it, sending a pulse of energy coursing through the room. The moment the zero-point energy generator activated, the air in the room seemed to thrum with an unfamiliar energy, like the very molecules of the atmosphere were holding their breath. Alistair could feel the vibrations in the floor beneath him, a low hum that made his bones tingle. The sleek metallic device in his hand pulsated with a soft blue light, sending a delicate web of electromagnetic waves across the room, enveloping the princess's body in an invisible net. For a second, nothing happened. Alistair cocked an eyebrow and glanced over at the Viridian doctor, who was standing stiffly in the corner, his 6 eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and fascination. The doctor's expression was unreadable, but Alistair had been in enough high-pressure situations to recognize a nervous twitch when he saw one. The doctor's eyes flicked to the princess, then back to Alistair. "So, do you, want to tell me what happens next?" the doctor asked, voice a little too tight. Alistair shot him a quick grin, partly to alleviate his own nervousness, partly because it seemed to irritate the Viridian more than anything else. Well, in my experience, if you try to fix a problem and it doesn't immediately blow up in your face, you're probably doing something right. He gestured toward the princess. And I'm not dead yet, so there's that. The doctor blinked in confusion, but before he could respond, a sharp, unexpected shift rippled through the air. The princess's body stiffened, her chest rising and falling in a pattern that suggested the nanobots had reacted. The diagnostic readouts flickered, displaying erratic spikes in her bioelectric field. Alistair's heart skipped a beat. This was exactly what he had hoped for. He leaned closer to the holographic panel and began manipulating the data streams, adjusting the frequencies as the zero-point energy device continued its work. The nanobots, it seemed, were now struggling to maintain their dominance over her cells. The pulse of energy from the generator had disrupted their steady control, forcing them into a state of chaos. The air in the room thickened with the tension of 1,000 possibilities. If he miscalculated, even by a fraction, the princess's system could overload. Her heart could stop. Her internal organs could collapse. It was a gamble, but one Alistair was willing to take. There was no other choice. "Well, here goes nothing," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else, before tapping a series of controls on the medical interface. Time to see if this whole playing God thing is really as fun as it sounds. The Viridian doctor made a noise that was half a grunt, half a gasp. "Dr. Cade, what are you doing? That's not standard procedure." "No kidding," Alistair replied with a wry smile. "You don't get to be Dr. Miracle by sticking to procedure." A sudden sharp noise pierced the air, a hiss, like the release of pressure from a seal. Alistair's eyes snapped to the princess. Her body began to glow faintly, the violet of her skin shimmering with a subtle radiance. The nanobots were retreating, losing their grip on her cells as though they were being pushed back by some unseen force. It was working. The generator's energy field was breaking through, reprogramming the nanobots at a cellular level, forcing them to align with her biological system rather than wreak havoc. "Yes!" Alistair cheered, pumping a fist in the air. "I told you this would work. Don't tell me you didn't doubt me, Doc." The Viridian physician was still staring, stunned into silence. But how?" Alistair didn't have time to explain, not with the task half done. His fingers danced over the medical interface, making final adjustments as the princess's body responded. Her breathing steadied. Her heart rate, once erratic, began to stabilize. The energy readings were becoming more consistent, the nanobots shifting from chaotic interference to cooperative alignment with her biology. "I'll be honest, I was starting to wonder if I'd need to grow a second set of hands to manage all this," Alistair muttered, glancing at the screen in front of him. "Good thing my ego's bigger than the room." I do not understand," the Viridian doctor said, still baffled. "Your methods, your human technology, it is unlike anything we have ever seen. This is impossible." Alistair shrugged. "Well, I've got a degree in impossible. It's what I do. Anyway, I think we're about done here." But as Alistair finished his sentence, the princess's eyes fluttered open. They were the color of deep ocean waves, dark and mysterious, but now they gleamed with something else, intelligence, clarity. She blinked a few times, looking around, her gaze falling on Alistair. There was no immediate panic, no confusion, just calm, composed recognition. "Dr. Cade?" Her voice was soft, but there was strength beneath it. Alistair froze, unsure how to respond. She was conscious, and she was looking right at him. There was a moment of surreal quiet, the weight of her gaze pressing down on him like gravity itself. "Princess," he managed, his voice slightly hoarse. He cleared his throat. "You're, looking better. A lot better, actually. That glow? Totally normal for me. Happens after a solid cup of coffee. You know, no big deal." Her lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile forming. "You are the human who saved me?" Her voice was still faint but growing stronger with each word. Alistair nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the room, the gravity of the situation settling on him. "Yep, that's me. Dr. Cade, savior of the galaxy. If you need an autograph later, just let me know." She smiled, the warmth in her expression both unexpected and disarming. "I owe you my life," she said, her tone more serious now. "You have saved me when all hope was lost. My father, he will wish to thank you personally." "Ah, the king," Alistair said with a raised eyebrow, his grin widening. "I'm going to take a wild guess here and say I might be getting a pretty sweet reward, huh?" The princess's expression softened. "Perhaps," she said, her voice a mix of intrigue and amusement. "But I suspect that the king's gratitude may come with unexpected consequences." Alistair chuckled. "Well, if the reward involves anything like the crazy stuff I've had to put up with so far, I'm sure it'll be a wild ride." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing in thought. "I believe you may be right, Doctor. I believe you may be right." The royal palace on Viridia 7 had become both a sanctuary and a cage in the days following the princess's recovery. Alistair had been whisked away to the most opulent chambers the Viridians had to offer, although, to be fair, he wasn't entirely sure whether it was out of gratitude or because they were worried he might break something important. The room, bathed in soft, violet lighting, was exquisite. Everything from the floating, bioluminescent plants to the holographic artwork seemed to hum with a quiet elegance. He had to admit, he'd been impressed by the hospitality. But it wasn't the luxury he'd expected. No, it was the king. King Thanor was not the type of ruler who enjoyed long, drawn-out formalities or speeches. The moment he had arrived to personally thank Alistair, he'd simply smiled, and then asked him without preamble if he would accept the gift. The word echoed in Alistair's mind as he sat at the grand table, now feeling the weight of the situation pressing in on him. The king had been blunt. "You saved my daughter's life. That deserves a reward beyond simple riches." But Alistair had learned quickly that rewards from powerful monarchs were rarely straightforward. When the king had first offered him immortality, Alistair had laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. But Thanor's face remained stony serious, his golden eyes gleaming with the intensity of someone who didn't offer things lightly. "You shall live forever, Dr. Cade. Your mind, your body, immune to the ravages of time. It is the gift of the ancients. Only a handful of beings have ever received it." At first, Alistair had thought it was a dream, an elaborate way of thanking him for saving the princess. But the more he thought about it, the more the implications sank in. Immortality. It sounded like a wish come true. Who wouldn't want to live forever? Who wouldn't want to see the stars beyond their dying breath? But the catch, as always, was a cruel one. The king had made it clear. It was a gift for him alone. The people Alistair loved, family, friends, those he would one day cherish, would age and die as normal. He would watch them grow frail and, in the end, leave him behind. It wasn't as simple as saying yes or no. Every corner of his life had been a calculated risk, but this was different. "Dr. Cade." The princess's voice broke into his thoughts, soft yet firm. She had entered the room without making a sound, her violet skin glowing faintly as she took a seat across from him. She was fully healed now, but there was something undeniably ancient about the wisdom in her gaze. "You are thinking of his offer again." Alistair exhaled, not quite meeting her eyes. "You know me too well." "I know you, yes," she said with a smile that was both knowing and bittersweet. "I know that immortality is not the gift you seek. It is the loneliness it would bring that troubles you." Loneliness. Alistair repeated the word slowly, his hands still resting on the table, as if the weight of his decision was physically pressing down on him. "I can't imagine living forever, watching everything I care about fade. I'm only human, Princess. I can't pretend that's something I could just shrug off." She nodded. "And yet, you have saved not only my life, but perhaps the very future of my people. Your humility, your heart, these are not the qualities of a man who seeks immortality for its own sake. Alistair leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the smooth surface. He hadn't realized how much of him had been tied to his humanity until this moment, how he'd always sought meaning in the fleeting moments of life, in the connections he made with people, in the vulnerability of being mortal. "I don't know what to do," he confessed, the weight of indecision pulling at him. "I don't know if I can live forever, without everyone I love." The princess smiled softly, standing up and walking to the window, her eyes lost in the view of the distant stars. "I too once thought I understood what immortality was," she said quietly. "But it is not simply the absence of death, it is a new kind of life, the one that asks you to walk forward with eyes wide open, knowing that what you lose will never come back. But what you gain, the experience, the knowledge, the growth, it is a gift that cannot be measured in years." For a moment, Alistair said nothing. Then, finally, he stood, walking toward her. He didn't know if he was ready for immortality, but he knew that this decision would define him forever, not just in how he lived, but in how he learned to let go. "Maybe it's not about the length of life," he said, glancing at the princess. "Maybe it's about what you do with the time you have." The princess looked at him with a glimmer of respect. "You have already given a great deal, and in a way your gift is to remind us that even immortality cannot change the human heart." A soft chime echoed from the doorway, signaling the arrival of King Thanor. His regal presence filled the room, and for the first time Alistair didn't feel the weight of the king's gaze bearing down on him. He felt at ease. "Dr. Cade," Thanor said, his voice like deep thunder, "you have saved my daughter, and for that I owe you a debt beyond any measure. But immortality is not a gift I give lightly. It is a curse as much as it is a blessing. You may choose to accept it, or not. But know this, you will always be welcome here on Viridia 7. Should you choose the path of life, you will never be alone." Alistair met the king's gaze, feeling something shift inside him. The weight of immortality wasn't just in the eternal life it promised, it was in the knowledge that even the most profound gifts could come at a cost. "I appreciate the offer, Your Majesty," Alistair said, his voice calm, "but I think I'll pass on the immortality part. I've got enough to deal with just getting through the next few years, let alone the next millennium." He smirked, lightening the mood. "Besides, who needs immortality when there's so much to see while you're still breathing?" King Thanor's eyes softened, a small approving smile crossing his face. "Very well, Doctor. You choose your own path. And I will respect that." As the king left, the princess stayed by Alistair's side, watching the stars from the window. A quiet peace settled over the room, one Alistair hadn't known he needed. In the end, it wasn't immortality that would define him. It was the journey, the choices, and the people he met along the way. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Alistair turned to the princess. "So, how about a cup of coffee? It's going to take a lot of caffeine to get through all this cosmic drama." The princess smiled, her laughter ringing softly in the vast chamber. "I believe that is something I can do." And for the first time since arriving on Viridia 7, Alistair felt like he was exactly where he needed to be.